and what makes a Roy Clouser, and what's the story behind the man writing the books, and what set you on this quest to prove to some degree the reality of God?
Sure. What set me on the quest was exactly expressed in the title of that book. When I was raised in a Christian home, my parents were dedicated Baptists, and I was raised as a Christian, and I'm very grateful for that. But I used to ask my parents and people at church and so on, even when I was a little kid, how do we know Scripture comes from God? Why isn't it the Buddhist writings or the Hindu writings, the stuff like when I was real little, I didn't know about them, but I'm still puzzled about the question. I should explain that although I had a good background in Christianity, my parents were also extreme fundamentalists.
Yeah.
When I say extreme, let me describe a little bit about that. I remember one day I came home from school, I was in fourth grade, and I told my mother how excited I was over a class we had. We learned that the stars were massive balls of gases concentrated, and so that they glowed, and I went on with what we had learned. And my mother said, "You don't really believe that, do you?" And I couldn't imagine why not. I was stunned. And she said, "Don't you think if that were true, the Bible would have told us?" Now, it's one thing to say there's nothing in the Bible that could possibly be wrong about anything. I don't think that's true. I mean, details that don't matter. When Paul says, for example, bring those manuscripts that I left at Troas to somebody, Timothy or whoever it is supposed to bring them. The answer might have been, you didn't leave them here, you must have left them somewhere else. That could be, you know what I mean? That we don't have to get really picky about that kind of stuff. But to say that everything that's true and worth knowing has to be in the book somewhere is unbelievable. I mean, what does the book say about metal stress or heat transfer? What does it say about airspace rights? I mean, that's almost ridiculously foolish, but they were very greatly under the influence of the Philadelphia School of the Bible. They had, right after my mom and dad had met, even before they were married, they attended classes there together. And they came away with a very anti-intellectualist, anti-education, anti-science attitude. So when I think I was in junior high, and my mom said to me, "You're at an age where you may hear your classmates talking about going to college. I just thought I'd tell you how we feel about that. We don't see why any Christian would go to college. It's just a place that ridicules your faith. If you get older and decide you want to go, we won't try to stop you, but don't look to us to support it." And that was the first and last conversation we ever had on the topic. It's, of course, historically, it's a little ironic that universities were all founded by Christians and so on. But it's a kind of I don't know what to call it, a myopic view of reality. Anyway, that's how I was raised. In high school, I decided, I don't know why, that I did want to go to college. So I saved up all the money I made mowing lawns and shoveling walks and babysitting and all that. And when I got to be a senior, I had $750 in the bank. And I had been very active in music. I played trombone in a group that got hired by a radio program that was broadcast every Saturday night from Times Square in New York.
Wow, fun.
ABC network. It was a kind of Billy Graham type evangelistic program. And so I spent the 2.5 years of my high school, going to New York every Saturday and playing in this and coming back. And I decided maybe I would go into music. So I mentioned that to my parents. Now you realize I never took SATs. I never visited a campus. I didn't talk to counselors because you can't talk to them. They're not real Christians. Why don't you ask our church choir director where he went? So I did. And he told me, and I went there. And a year there was $750. So I gave him all my money and I went. Now, the music courses actually weren't that bad. I won't mention the college because I'm going to say that the rest of it wasn't worth the powder to blow it up. When you say to a couple of guys, you're standing around just hanging in the men's dorm, hey, let's go over to the hub and get a soda. And they say, well, no, it's kind of late. I said, what do you mean? The hub doesn't close till late. Well, it's getting dark. What are you guys afraid of the dark? They said, it's not that. There might be demons in the bushes. Now I came to the instant conclusion that I had paid my money to go to a madhouse. Anyway, I met a new friend. I made a new friend at my church. This was a non-denominational fundamentalist church. And I don't know why his parents decided to go there. His background was the opposite of mine. His parents were college grads. Mine had never finished high school. They sent him to Episcopal Academy, and he was graduating from Haverford College, top places, and so on. And he said to me, next fall, I'm going to Reformed Episcopal Seminary. Wouldn't it be great if we went together? Now, I should explain, the seminary did take people without having done college first. In fact, they emphasized that there were real advantages to doing that seminary, then college, if you could do it. What they didn't tell me was that 66% of the people that tried it flunked. I'm glad I didn't know that. But at any rate, at his urging, we both entered that seminary in together. That was the fall of 1956.
A few years ago.
A few years ago, yes. And so now I'm entering a gray stone Gothic building where there's a great emphasis on scholarship. The professors have collars. This is like I feel like Alice in Wonderland.
Yeah.
I don't know my way around. I don't know what's going on half the time. So I go to the first class. I can't help tell you this one. The first class, the first day, is elementary Greek. This seminary required 3 years of Greek and 3 years of Hebrew of everybody.
Wow.
Yeah, 3 years of theology and so on. They had no electives.
That's serious.
Yeah, go to first class, first day is elementary Greek. Professor comes in the room. He's very tall. He has what looks like a dueling scar over one eye. His last name is Prussian. And he walks to the front of the class and he says, I can't do the voice. He sounded like the Jolly Green Giant. Gentlemen, this is the elimination course. My calling is to keep men out of the ministry. I consider my test a success when the blood is 4 feet deep and the bodies are floating around the room.
That's amazing.
Yeah, those are his exact words. You can see why I never forgot him.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's terrifying. So, in fact, they had chapel every Wednesday, and they would have 2 seniors conduct a service from the prayer book, and then each preach a short sermon. And there's a faculty critic there who grades them, comments on them, and it's the same professor. So these 2 seniors get up, they conducted a service well, and then they preached. The first one, I thought that was really mediocre, but the second one was horrible. I actually thought to myself, I don't want to sound like a wise guy. just a kid here. I'm sitting there and saying, that's a job of somebody that's already finished 2 years of seminary and is a senior. I could do better than that right now. I'm sorry to say I actually thought that. Anyway, I then thought, how is this professor ever going to tell this guy tactfully and gently that this really wasn't any good? I needn't have worried. He walked to the front of the room and he said, that sermon was a stench in the nostrils of God. Anyway, I knew I had come to the right place. I just loved it. I ate it up. And then when by the time I was in the middle year there, I knew that my calling was philosophy of religion.
Mm.
I'm concerned mainly with what they call in a seminary apologetics, the defense of faith, and answering my own question: how do we know Scripture comes from God? I had gotten some answers there. One time our church had a speaker from Moody Bible Institute. And my mom said, I've invited him to dinner after church. Why don't you ask him that question? So I waited and I kept my mouth shut through all the adult conversation. I think I was 12, 13. And then guy's putting on his coat, getting ready to leave. And I said, hey, Mom. And she said, oh, yes, our son has a question for you. And so this guy's got his coat and hat on. He's ready to walk out the door. And I said, how do we know Scripture comes from God? He said, oh, yes, of course. Yes. Well, the Bible has sold more copies than any other book in history.
Wow.
And he left. And my mom looked at the look on my face and said, you're disappointed, aren't you? I mean, I wasn't very old, but I'm old enough to know that was a pretty stupid answer.
I've got a story for you about I got my undergrad in biblical studies. They didn't even require, but I ended up taking a year of Greek and Hebrew. But I had started as a music major. And you can see keyboard. I did a lot of the contemporary Christian worship music in churches and stuff for a long time. Well, that was my goal, was to go there, and I wanted to be able to lead worship at this Christian college and meet people and learn how to do that better. There weren't any formalized, even at like early 2000s, there weren't formalized studies for that. So about a year and a half in, I decided, actually, I think I want to do a biblical studies major instead of music. And, I wasn't an academic. That wasn't really like my aim. I liked ideas. I liked theology. I was interested, but I was not academically, my mindset wasn't academic. So the big hard course, the professor that had a similar reputation was for our church history class, which I ended up taking. I liked it so much, I took it twice.
That's something.
The first time I remember, we were supposed to be writing essays, dialoguing with this. I think actually it was an essay about Martin Luther, and I was up late. I had procrastinated, and this is right, probably 2005. The internet was starting to get its legs for research in the undergrad times, and I thought, oh man, what's this? Oh, Wikipedia. Oh, this is perfect. And so I used Wikipedia as my main source for my paper, and I get the next week the professor's going through all the papers, and he's going through this is trash, and this is look at this red, it's inked up with red, and he gets to mine, and I'm sitting close to the front. He just looks at me and says, and Baxter, don't cite Wikipedia as a source on a paper. Sure, you can appreciate.
Okay, we've somewhat parallel stories there so far. Well, I got to be a senior in seminary. I was convinced that my calling was to teach, and it would be philosophy of religion. It's what would be called in a college or university, would be the specialty. But now I needed to finish my undergraduate work or the seminary wouldn't give me a degree. And in my senior year, in between the two semesters in January, the Dutch philosopher Herman Dooyeweerd gave 5 lectures in Philadelphia. That's where Reformed Episcopal Seminary was. He didn't give them at the seminary, he gave them at another seminary. But he had been on a speaking tour. He had spoken at Harvard, I think Yale, and then he had come down to Penn and the seminary. And I heard him give these 5 lectures. And there's a lot in it I didn't understand, but there was a good bit I did. And this guy is maybe the first in the history of Christianity to propose that there is and needs to be such a thing as a Christian philosophy. Almost all the major thinkers, the church fathers, Augustine, Anselm, Aquinas, whoever you want to pick, they all said there was no such thing as a Christian philosophy. There's Christian theology, and then there can be a Christian version of any philosophy. He said, no, there's a distinctly Christian view. And I was really fascinated by that. So I'm now thinking about where to finish, where to go back to college and finish. And somebody told me that there was a college named Gordon College in the north part of Massachusetts. I'd never heard of it. I didn't know anything about it, except that this person said they offer a course on Dooyeweerd. So I wrote to them, I applied, sight unseen, and I was accepted. When I got there, I found out they did not have a course on Dooyeweerd. Yeah. They had a course on contemporary philosophy for philosophy majors, and in that course, the person who was teaching it covered Dooyeweerd as one figure in on the contemporary scene. But I found all that out after they gave me a scholarship for the first year, and I went up. And it's a very funny story about arriving there. I'd never been to the north part of Massachusetts, and I'm finding my way along the route on the map and so on. I get to Grapevine Road and the turn in to the college parking lot. And as I'm coming in, I have the radio on. The Boston Symphony is playing Mendelssohn's Fifth Symphony. That's the Reformation Symphony. So as I'm pulling in, on the Boston Symphony is playing A Mighty Fortress Is Our God. I pull in, and there's a professor walks across the parking lot with a copy of Dooyeweerd's book under his arm. And I took it as a sign.
I like it.
Yeah. So I went there. Of course, I've had to support myself, and I had a scholarship for the first year, so I didn't have to worry about tuition, but books and so on, it's all on me to work and pay for the whatever is necessary at the college and squeeze in studying when I can and so on. So I was terrified that I was going to run out of money or employment or a place to live, or there were so many things that could go wrong here that I was really scared I wouldn't finish. So what I did was way overload my schedule. I took 27, 28 hours. I did 3 years in 2.
Yeah.
And by my senior year, it looked like I was going to make it. I'm cleaning houses in the town, and I was conducting choir at the Russian Baptist Church in Peabody, Massachusetts, and I was teaching the fellowship in the evening, Sunday evenings at the Presbyterian Fellowship and stuff. I'm piecing stuff together. But between the semesters, Gordon College had all the seniors, the graduating seniors, take the GRE exams. The graduate record exams, for your viewers that don't know about them, are the equivalent of SATs that you take in high school to get into college. The GREs are to get into graduate school. And not all graduate schools require them. The ones I was thinking about didn't, so I didn't think I needed them. But the college required everyone to take them and paid for them. If they hadn't paid for them, done that, I never would have taken them because I couldn't afford it. But I took them, and in those days, well, here's what there were more exams than they gave, but here what they gave was 3 1-hour exams in the morning, 9 to 12. Social sciences, natural sciences, humanities, 1 hour each. A 1 hour break for lunch, and from 1 to 4, a 3 hour exam in your major, which is philosophy. So I took them, and I'm having fun. I don't need them, right? I'm looking at the other guys who told me they were interested in graduate school, and they're all sweating bullets, and I'm giving them stuff like that, and just fooling around with them. So now I have, after the exam, I came down to the Philadelphia area, which was where the 2 schools were that I thought I had the best chance of applying. I'd made contacts while I was at seminary and at Reformed Episcopal. And I had an interview with each of them. They each told me they couldn't take me. The first one was a master's program endowed by an endowment that stipulated preference had to be given to Quakers. And they said, I'm sorry, but we've had 2 applicants this year who are Quakers, and we have to give them preference. And the second was a seminary doctoral program that said, wait a minute, you did a year at college, then you went to seminary. When you went back to college, Gordon gave you credit for some of the things you did seminary. So you're not a graduate student. We'll take you as an undergraduate, but no school in the US is going to take you as a graduate student. So I went back to the Gordon campus very discouraged. And then the GREs came back. And to my great surprise, my scores were over the moon. So I went to my advisor in the philosophy department, wonderful man, Grady Spires, who was finishing his dissertation at Harvard. And I said, what do you think? Is it worth me applying? And he said, all you got to lose a stamp. So I wrote a letter, and to my amazement, I got an interview. I knew what this guy was going to say. He's going to look at Gordon College, where I was summa cum laude. He's going to look at the seminary where I was summa cum laude, and he's going to say, well, this looks good, but I never heard of these places. Why should I take you? Actually, and I kept the GREs inside my jacket pocket. See, a little dramatic flair I had in mind.
Yeah.
But when I put he put the transcripts down on his desk, he said more than that. He said, I've never heard of these places, and we've already turned down people from Yale and Cornell who study with friends of mine. Why should I take you? And I said, well, that's what I expected you to say. So I brought this, and I whip out yours and put him. I brought this as corroboration. He did something I've never seen before and never seen since. He moved his cigarette from the middle of his mouth round to the side and held it in his molars without touching it. And he turned around, swiveled around, and called somebody up and said, what do we usually do with somebody that scored? And he read the scores off, and that's what I thought. Boom. He hangs up. He says to me, I see that you, at Gordon College, you took epistemology. What'd you read in that course? And we had read 2 books by A.J. Ayer, who was a leading spokesman for logical positivism. This is a view that wants to say that science is everything, and whatever isn't science isn't just false. It doesn't rise to that dignity. It's meaningless. So it's neither true nor false. It was an extreme view that had been critiqued severely in the late 50s and collapsed by the early 60s. This is 1961. I'm having this interview at Harvard. So this guy asked me what I thought of air, and I started ripping into air, and, and I didn't know who I was talking to. He says, "Oh, well, none of us call ourselves positivists anymore." And I thought I had really blown it. That's foot and mouth, man. You just blew it. Anyway, he says, okay, uh, we're going to find a way to get you.
Hmm.
We only have 12 students in this program, and we've already taken 12, but we'll find a way to get you here anyway. But meanwhile, one more thing, I want to see a paper you wrote. So I go home and I look at the papers. By this time, I was supporting myself as a minister in charge of the Evangelical United Brethren Church of Central Square, Cambridge. It had 80 members when I took the position and 90 when I left.
There you go.
Anyway, I look at these, and I thought the best paper I had written was on a French Christian existentialist. Now, that's as far as you can get from a logical positivist. It's the other extreme. And I hesitated. Can I send this to a guy who used to be a positivist and now is still trying to be as close to that as possible, obviously? And I agonized over. Finally, I put it in the envelope and mailed it. I said, "The hell with it. I am not going to go nuts with this." When I arrived the next fall in the program, the History and Philosophy of Religion program had a speaker for a guest speaker for the year. It was Gabrielle Marcel. I couldn't believe it. I actually went and tried to listen to some of his lectures, but between the echo in the hall and his accent, I couldn't understand him, so I gave up. But if you talk about providence,
So that was the French. That was the
I
French.
don't know how you could. I sent him a paper on the one guy that they're having come as the guest speaker in the program.
Wow.
Anyway, I was there for a year. I studied with Paul Tillich and Richard Niebuhr and Richard Niebuhr and Heiko Obermann, the historian, and I had Ernest Wright, the archaeologist for Old Testament. It was a cavalcade of stars, and it was absolutely wonderful year academically.
I even recognize a few of those names.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course, I had one meal a day and no meat all winter. And when I got the free medical exam that's given to all the graduate students, the doctor said, "What's the matter with you? Have you been sick?" And I explained that wasn't the problem. Anyway, I got called in the spring for follow-up interview, and the guy said, "I didn't even know what my grades were at this point." He looks down at his file and says, "Well, you have all honors grades, and so you certainly come back, but in good conscience, I couldn't recommend it. The program looks like it's on its way out. I'm going to Oxford next year. Cohen and Lehman have resigned. Tillich is retired. Who would you write with? We should talk about transferring." And I said, "Well, I was thinking about Penn." "Oh, that's a great idea. Why don't you do that? I'll write you a letter. I have friends there and blah, blah, blah." So I went down, I had an interview at Penn, and they took me into the PhD program there. And the chairman of the department was a Harvard grad, Harvard
There you
PhD.
go.
Yeah. So that's how I came to end up at Penn, where I got the MA and PhD writing on Dooyeweerd. Yeah.
Okay. And that sets you off on this course. And then, for I guess, was your first book related to your dissertation or your thesis? Or?
Yes. Yes. The dissertation had been on Dooyeweerd. The committee at Penn said, the chairman at Penn said, put it this way to me when I asked to write on him, "We're going to approve this dissertation on two conditions. One is you have to go there and work on it with him." And he engineered to get me a Harrison Fellowship, and I went over there for the summer of 1967. That was the first time I had met him. I met him. And then he said the second condition is that he writes me a letter and says, "You got him right." Nobody here is going to read all his stuff and examine you on whether you got him right. We will examine you on whether you think he is right.
Okay.
Okay, so in the summer of '67, I went over to Amsterdam, and my contact was the Free University where he had taught. He was then retired, and the people at the university were very accommodating. They had found me an apartment and stuff like that. And the secretary of the department said, "I have an appointment with you with Vollenhoven and De Boer and Riesen and you know, all these people. And then next Tuesday, you see Dewey." And I said, "Whoa, wait a minute." I spent the entire fellowship and an advance on my salary to come here and work all summer with Dewey. I only have one appointment. And he said, obviously, he doesn't even work here anymore. It's up to him whether he wants to see you. I mean, he's not obliged. And I've realized, of course, how foolish I had been to assume that they could set up a whole bunch of appointments. Why would the guy agree to that? He doesn't know me from Adam. So the next Tuesday rolls around and I'm on the tram going to Dewey's house, wondering what I'm going to say that's going to get him to invite me back. And nothing came to me. So I arrived at his door with nothing in mind or in hand.
Mm.
So housekeeper opened the door and said, "He's up in his study." I went up and he was very gracious. "How can I help you?" And I said, this is all spur of the moment. I said, "Well, since I've arrived, I've been here about a week. And since I've arrived, I've spoken with a number of people. And every single one of them has told me that I'm not understanding you right. So why don't I tell you what I think is going on in the new critique of theoretical thought?" This was his big work. It was 3 volumes, very complicated, difficult to read. I said, "Why don't I tell you what's going on and you stop me when I'm wrong?" He said, "Go ahead." So I started in. And I go on, and I went on for about 40 minutes. And he finally started to laugh. He said, "Who told you that's wrong?"
Yep.
"That's what I want to hear." So I named all the people. He said, "So many misunderstandings." And then this is spur of the moment. I said, "Well, if that is right, I have a problem." And I took a sheet of paper and I put down what I thought were the main claims of the new critique in logical notation. Then I put down the main conclusion in logical notation and constructed a proof that it was an invalid argument. In other words, the conclusion didn't follow from the premises. And he looked at that and he said, "Well, nobody's ever made that criticism before." But it was obvious why the conclusion didn't follow. There was another option that hadn't been ruled out. So we both instantly focused on that, started to talk about how to deal with that option. And he said, "Well, it's getting late. When can you come back?"
There's the golden words.
So I saw him every Tuesday for the rest of the summer. We had two to 2.5 hours an evening. And then Andy invited me to dinner.
Mhm.
So that was a wonderful summer for me.
I can't imagine, that like the thread for you going back to that, seeing I guess those lectures, and that was in your beginning of your undergrad, correct? When you saw him lecture in.
No, that was one. Yeah, well, I was at seminary. It was my senior year at
Yeah.
seminary.
And he became kind of this, icon that you were aiming at, and then to be able to develop a real actual relationship
Yeah,
and
that
for him to
that
respect.
I never ever thought even imagined could happen. Now, the follow up to that is that I went back. I'm working, and I have a family, and so it took me some years to put together a dissertation. And when I did that, I kept in communication with him. Communication means airmail,
That's right.
right? You can call somebody on the phone, but to do that, you have to put your name on a list. for your call to go across the transatlantic cable and ring a phone somewhere in Amsterdam.
Mm.
It would be a central location. It wouldn't be his house. And so he's what, 78 years old or something, and he's not going to go down and into central Amsterdam to answer the phone at 3 a.m.
Mm.
I mean, whenever your call comes up, it's up. That's 4 a.m. It doesn't matter. You take your turn when it comes, and it costs $20 a call.
Wow.
$20 a minute, excuse me, for a call. And that's when that was a lot more money than it is now. So that's out. So we're communicating by airmail. And finally I wrote to him and I said, trying to do this by airmail is like trying to play chess by mail. It would be better, I think, if I came back and went all over this with you. And he agreed. So the free university gave me airfare. And a friend I had made while I was there, one of the people I consulted with, was Johann van der Hoeven, the professor of modern philosophy. A wonderfully gifted person. He was very sharp, had a very subtle mind, and very friendly. We really hit it off. He took me around Amsterdam and stuff, and it was just great. And he said to me, "Don't rent a room. We just moved. We have a big house. 3rd floor is empty. Come stay with us."
Wow.
So I went there in August to September of 71 and went all over the dissertation, went to Harvard, came back, revised and fixed it up, and proposed that my committee that we set a date for the oral exam. Now, in Europe, an oral exam of a PhD dissertation is a formality. You hire a caterer, you invite all your friends and relatives, you're going to get a PhD that day. People will ask you questions and you try to answer them, but nothing hangs on how you do that. That's not true in the US. In the US, you can do all the courses, you can pass the PhD exams, pass the 2 language exams, get the topic approved, get a committee together and the topic approved, write the dissertation, the committee approves that it's ready to be defended. You go to the oral defense and you can be failed. In fact, one of the first stories I heard when I transferred to Penn was about a fellow to whom that happened. And he decided not to be defeated. He got a new topic, a new committee, wrote another dissertation. They approved it. He came up for defense and they failed him again.
Wow.
That's a horror story nobody wants to hear.
Do you feel like the standards are still that high across the board?
Oh, yeah.
I had another question on
PhD,
that.
The people that form these committees at the graduate schools and so on rightfully know that they're the gatekeepers to that profession. The people they approve of, the people they grant a degree to, are going to be the people that do it to the next generation.
Yeah.
You want the best people that you can get. Not only do you not have to be a dummy at Penn, they actually cared about moral uprightness. I don't mean that they sent out the moral police to investigate people. One of my classmates told me that the way he put it was, my wife is stupid and she got pregnant, so we sold the baby on the black market. And I said something to a friend of his, did he really do that? And the friend said, well, it happened twice, actually.
Wow.
Now, I did not blow the whistle on him, but the graduate group committee got wind of that, flunked him out on the spot.
One of the things you mentioned in that story with Duiverd was the fact that trying to communicate through writing just couldn't work, and you needed the embodied connection, the conversation.
Yeah.
One of the thoughts I've been having recently was the idea about the Reformation and the figures at play with that being the primary mode for trying to parse out the problems of the church,
Sure.
and how that, it was a little struggle for us to get online here today, but we're talking hours and hours
Right.
apart, and we can have a likely fairly productive conversation, and now we could show each other. Even if I wanted to, I could show you something I've written, I could put it on the screen, and you know well, that a lot, I'm assuming a lot of that during that time, it was all writing, and it took days and weeks and months for those communications to take place. If you were trying to converse with somebody else that was you're trying to deal with these ideas about, and I just think that we've been in that stage for a long time, and we're kind of entering into a stage where we can actually do both write and converse.
Mhm. Well, they tried to even in the 16th century. I mean, for example, Luther met with other people
Zwingli.
and debated them. Um, uh, they had discussions about this stuff at length when they could. The problem was that it was so difficult to travel and so expensive, and so it wasn't easy to just go to Paris and talk to so and so. But so they relied a lot on the writing, yeah. But
I guess I'm
most
wondering
stuff was done in
what's gonna
person.
happen with this new medium.
Yeah.
What
Oh,
with
it's just amazing. Yeah.
how, with the future of, and that kind of leads us. I don't know if you're ready to kind of talk about your upcoming work and some of your recent